in a few words about your role at the university?
Sure. Hello, hello everyone. So my name's Kevin Mortimer. I'm head of operations in TTS. So my role is to look after all the IT infrastructure, which includes our networks, includes Microsoft 365, includes our research infrastructure, and things that host the storage around the servers around the iTrent and I think Aggresso, student records as well, and we also worked on things around and then the digital dining piece with Oracle Cloud, which is like it's another public cloud provider that we work with. So that's the role that I have with my teams, and so yeah, I think everybody here touches part of something that my team looks after at some point on their day-to-day life working at university.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin is also a sustainability champion and he's been doing lots of good work about sustainability and he's been, doing good kind of works with Luke. So Kelvin, thank you so much for that question. I'll just go straight to the next question so we could round up quickly and then people could ask us more questions. Can you tell us about some of the IT solutions implemented to promote environmental sustainability at our university?
Yeah, sure. So and some of the this one actually goes back to when I first started 7 or so years ago. We had quite a lot of aging infrastructure across the university, and often different versions or predecessors, if you like, of things. So what we've been very closely working on is trying to reduce the amount of duplication we have across the estate. We're trying to simplify and standardize everything. The reason why, the key reason for doing that is to actually make the services that we provide to the users of the university or our customers, is we can provide the warranty around things. So that has really been the key focus, and the outcome of that ultimately has been that we've managed to close down the Lisle data center, which was housing lots of research infrastructure, and we've moved that into the Early Gate data center. When I say data center, it's basically a big room with servers in with environmental controls like aircon and bits in it. And the Early Gate data center, we had lots of central IT kit in, which we've decommissioned and just made smaller, freeing up the space, which allowed us to move Lisle into that space. We've also been working on reviewing aircon temperatures or room temperatures, which has aircon present, to as the kit or equipment we have is more modern now. It has higher tolerance to temperature and humidity as well. We haven't gone too rogue, if you like, with some of these settings. We're working very closely with the BMS team and with the sustainability team. We've kind of been agreeing what's a sensible number. Often it's only sort of 2, 3, maybe 4 degrees difference that we're making to rooms. So they're still cool. They're still environmentally sort of well within tolerance. It just means that equipment's not working as hard to cool the space. And one of the things we're doing with our data center that we have in the ground floor of maths is we're working with sustainability to make that room smaller. We had a lot of equipment in there at one point. We don't have anywhere near as much equipment there now, so we're putting a wall up in that space to make it a lot easier to manage the environment around. So the air conditioning is working appropriately for the size of the space, and we're even looking about doing some stuff with the fire suppression in there to make it more sustainable and greener for our maintenance teams as well, to reduce some of the spend. So I guess one of the key things is really not all just about the sustainability environmentally view of it. We're trying to consider how we use finances better for the organisation generally as well, and help other areas that look after buildings save money.
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. when you hear IT and sustainability, you might just be wondering what possibly could they be doing that could have impact with the environment. And with just so many things you're doing in ITs and DTS, it's really, really key to kind of meet our sustainability target and also to cut costs. So thank you, Kelvin. I'll just go next to the next question. At this moment, I don't know, Luke, do you want to add one or two to what Kelvin, because I know you do lots of things with Kelvin. Yeah, I don't know, do you want to say or just add one or two things to what Kevin just said?
Well, I'll start with there are some slides coming. I'm just looking for where I've put them. So I will also apologise. I've got a cold and sound awful. So that's probably another 2 points. Putting that aside, though, one of the biggest points I think from what Kevin's been talking about, a relationship that DTS and sustainability have had, is going back over 6 or 7 years now, between my many conversations that sometimes we see eye to eye, sometimes we don't, and I'm sure that will reflect on kind of the long relationship and direction we continue to go and travel in, doing everything just that little bit at a time, with constant clarity with each other, and through department kind of collaboration, we're making really a lot of headway. I think, yeah, that would be all I put in here at the moment. I'll just find these slides. I'll be back in a second.
I guess it's not all about how what the space that DTS look after as well that we're focusing on here. So one of the network that everyone uses every day, we have around 40% utilization across the what's plugged in to that equipment. So if we had 1,000 switches, we need 400. And if you think about how many watts each of those switches runs at, it's probably about 200 to 600 watts of power supply. Multiply that up by 600 switches, that's quite a lot of power that's been consumed unnecessarily. So we're embarking on a network futures program as well, which was going to allow us to rationalize the network equipment that we have, as well as cybersecurity best practice changes coming in as well. So there's lots of things that go everywhere really, and so yeah, now I think a good example then is like on the smart plugs, and we've got TRVs and valves in there, but something else we're working with the team on. So Internet of Things capability. So these little components that sit around the campus that provide some level of building control. So on the radiators, we're looking to work with the sustainability team to allow how to basically change those centrally. So and well, within the tolerance, the university has got us a heating policy. So around temperature 8 means 4. So rather than heating a whole building, if one room's particularly hot, then the smart TOV will kick in and reduce it down to what is the target temperature for that space, which means that everything has to work less hard and saves energy and all those good bits and pieces as well. I'm sure Luke could articulate that more elegantly than I can. But also similar with smart plugs as well. So we're currently working together to try to work out how much does it cost to run a lab. And we did a recent activity using some measurable plugs in the Chancellor's building. And I don't know, Luke, do you want to talk through the numbers around that?
Yes. So let's start with just smart technology as a whole. This is about kind of getting down to much lower levels of control in our building estate, to the point of plug sockets. So these are, you might see a few of them dotted around. They're either on an extension lead, or you can change the faceplate of a normal plug socket with these, what we call smart sockets. We have been trialing this currently just in Chancellor's room 101, ironic, just to say a little bit, with regards to what what are the if there were no boundaries and we could just shut off everything nicely, what are the possibilities? So what we did is we, over the Christmas period, DTS did a whole thing about switching off PC labs monitors and also devices across the university. This kind of is great, but uses a lot of resource in terms of human beings, whereas this technology offers the opportunity to really go in at a level and kind of switch things off under lots of different circumstances. To talk through a little bit of it, 60 PCs in this room. There is also an AV cabinet that supports, like most of you've seen, either a smart board or a projector, a PC device, quite a lot of different bits and pieces, microphones, kind of those sorts of things. So what we did, if you remove all the stats that I'm showing you at the moment, a PC just left on standby uses roughly 30 pence a day. Don't quote me all of these numbers because it varies depending upon your PC device and how old your item might be. So these are just from calculations from the Chancellor's spaces, so referencing to those specific devices. And for a monitor, it was round about, left on standby, 20 pence, which seems incredible that a monitor just on standby for 24 hours uses that much. We're talking really small figures, and everyone's probably scratched their head. 20 pence, oh, I can live with that. But looking at the university estate as a whole, you add that up quite quickly, and some of the numbers that you see in front of you are the roughly, obviously, with that rule of thumb, all these devices might not be the same, might be drawing different powers, but multiplying with that data that we've collected from chancellors, there's some good savings there to be had if we're just putting everything left on as default. Of course, there's bound to be a few academics out there that say, but that means on my PC, if we applied some of these savings, it's not going to come on for my lecture at 9 o'clock in the morning, or it's going to be disrupted through the day. All of these different options have kind of considered those variables. So what it would do is the plug socket would be programmed to come on an hour before the session starts. This has also been a conversation through DTS. We have concerns. We've got quite a lot of aging assets. How many pieces of machinery will actually come back on? Again, this is all about those discussions, clarifying kind of the art of the possible and all of those elements, but also being very transparent in here. This is warts and all in terms of kind of what we're relaying, but also the potential savings, which as a university, always a keen driver when we talk about what's really happening is that monetary value. Kevin, do you think I covered enough there for you?
Yeah, no, I think that's good, Luke. And I think we're always looking at different power sources as well. So the Wi-Fi that's across the campus, we have around 1,500 of those. If we knew there was nobody in a building between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., then we could look to turn those off, and they're powered over the network cable, but we could turn off, we could have some automation to kick in and actually turn those access points off in that period of time. And if somebody came in, then we can maybe turn it back on again by using some of the smart capabilities that we have here. But you know, we're looking at lots of different ways where power is consumed. So similarly with the AV cabinets, a lot of that is actually provided over the network cables that are in there as well, rather than power plugs. So we're looking at all these. So whilst we're looking at power sockets here, there's a lot more other power consumption methods that again we're looking to see how we can be smarter with ultimately, and not waste money, because the more money that we can save on electricity, the more money is left in the pot for other things that university needs to use to deliver its teaching research.
Okay, Kevin, thank you, and thank you, Luke, for that wonderful contribution. The third question is about AI and IoT. I know you've said things about the TRV and the smart plug, but I'll just go ahead and ask you the question. So, how can emerging technologies like AI and IoT contribute to sustainable practices at the university?
Yes, for me, that just extends that last conversation we're having. To be honest, so within our access points, the Wi-Fi that we have around campus, we have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capability in there. That's a cloud-hosted management plane, and from there it has API access, so we can programmatically query the platform, and where there's certain triggers around nobody being maybe moving in their building for maybe 2 hours, we can probably safely say, actually, if that's also at a time point, I'll say 9 p.m., then that might be a good time to say, actually, we can use that data to then power off and intervene with either reducing heating, lighting, maybe interacting that system into the smart plugs as well, to say, actually, we don't need the smart plugs that are powered connected to monitors on standby, because we know there's nobody in the building because there's no activity on Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, for example. There's loads of detail around that we'd have to obviously go through, because not everyone has a phone or everyone's a Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, etc. But there's degree, is looking at how can we basically look at the data sets that we've got, put it all together, then overlay some sort of dashboarding to then help us make decisions to be just a lot smarter with this as well. I think that ultimately the objective here is to save the university cash going out the door to energy companies, and so we can use that more internally sustainably, I guess. So that's the ultimate piece, and that also happens to help our green targets as well, which are, from a growth perspective, are important to the university to have the right messaging.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. The fourth one is, how do you ensure that IT projects align with the broader sustainability goals and targets of the university?
So everything in the infrastructure space, I'll leave it there, because in that scoping piece, because it could get quite complex otherwise. But one of the things that, like I said, with our network refresh, we're looking at, actually, what do we actually need to have? How can we reduce the amount of power that's running? Some of our comms rooms around campus are cooled as well. If we reduce the amount of hardware in there by 50%, can we have maybe a grill on the door to let some of the warmth escape through there naturally, rather than having to then have a cooling system in place to keep that room temperature at a sensible level? There's lots of things we do around those IT projects. So with our data centers, when we come to technology refresh, well, how can we get more with less? So we used to have 30 racks. So if you think of a rack maybe as, I don't know, an old-fashioned phone box sort of size, if we've lost 30 of those across our data center in terms of space. If each of those was consuming 5 to 10 kilowatts an hour of power, if you think about, that's a lot of data, a lot of power that we've reduced down. So that every project essentially has a power point to it. So how can we do this as optimally as we can? Luke, do you want to just talk through this slide a little bit?
Yes. So obviously mentioned Kevin's team set about reducing. We had 3 main survey rooms at the university down to 2. But I just want to focus, the graph below is particularly the maths IT buildings data center. What you can see is from August 15 up to, I think it's January 17, you can see quite a high level of consumption. And in terms of energy consumption is in orange. And then round about February 17, so February 2017, there's a reduction in the baseline there. That was through some of the work that Kevin was highlighting just there, by reducing the amount of servers in the space, reduce the amount of energy, which has since got us to think about the cooling capacity. it has been reduced since 2018. This graph is a bit old, but I wanted to demonstrate two things with this graph. We can document when things change in terms of the data, and we can also highlight the working relationship between sustainability and TTS has been running a little while. That's now enough on that, I think. So,
and I guess going forward as well, it's not just about the infrastructure where we're looking to make these changes. So by moving to a laptop first sort of culture as well, rather laptops consume a lot less power than a standard desktop does, and when you take that device home, even if it stays in your bag overnight, that's not consuming any power from any grid sort of power source. Whereas if you had a PC in your office, that would often be left on overnight, and it might go into a sort of hibernate, sort of sleep mode, but it will still be consuming power. So moving to a laptop approach is one thing that, again, is making some real headways. And there was a recent staff article with Microsoft about how we've moved to a much more sustainable way to look after our devices that our staff have access to as well. So and then looking forwards, how can we operate lab environments with not running such high spec machines? Can we do that in a different way? That's a much greener way to do that. Same experience for students and access to the same resources, but how can we make that as power unintensive as we can, and be just generally a lot greener in how we look at those. So we're having those sort of conversations now, as well as tech refresh of lab PCs kind of come up. Can we do something different here? You know, do we give it a go and see how it gets on? So we get on with that. Yeah, and that's where that smart plug piece again comes in, because we can actually measure the impact of something, and so even though something might be more expensive to operate, does it actually make it a lot greener and sustainable for us to operate that way?
Yeah, thank you. And I will just ask the last question, and it's, do you have any advice for others about what they can do to help be more sustainable and energy conscious through IT?
I think there's two things for me to answer this with. I think one's a at home view, and the other one for me is a workspace one. So if you're not using it, switch it off. It is quite it's an old message, really, from a power consumption perspective, but it's still amazing how much gets left on still here. Little things, just turning your monitors off, and in the evening that your room is sat in, you might have to leave your PC on for remote access requirements for those that have that need. But what can you do to kind of chip away at that? Reducing, if you have a TRV in your space, maybe you can reduce the heating that's spat out of that radiator yourself, rather than having to wait for a smart TRV to come in. Do you need to, if you're quite toasty in that space and it's quite nice, or the universe is paying for that to be heated, so maybe a few mini adjustments yourself, if it's accessible, you could look at doing that. So I think there's lots of different ways you can sort of save money from and being more sustainable from an end user perspective. Particularly where there's lighting and plug sockets involved. The other thing is, I would just encourage everyone to report issues to estates where you find things that could be improved. There's quite lighting around campus. If you found a way that could be something that's always on, maybe it's a broken sensor, maybe it could be put to a timer. There'll be all these opportunities around everywhere, and I think we all have a part to play in helping to identify those. And if we report it into estates, then it can be assessed, and so actually, does that make sense to do that or not? And sometimes programs will come into place, maybe if it's a wider problem everywhere, if everyone's reporting the same thing, it puts a bit of focus around it, because those sort of things help. And there's a lighting replacement program across campus at the moment to move to LED based lighting from tube fluorescent lighting. There's legislative kind of drive around this as well, because they're not they're not very green to manufacture, and the chemicals used in them aren't great, but also they're more expensive to run as an organization as well. So, but if we know their space has got lots of them or might be faulty, it might help those maybe get looked at being replaced as well, rather than a like for like unit going in there as well. So, but we can't make those assessments. That's where we need the experts in the States to kind of make those judgment calls. But if we don't tell them, then there's they're not going to be able to know everything that happens everywhere. So I think that would be, I guess, my big bit of request really for feedback is to just help estates know it's a very big campus. There's lots of different nookie holes and bits that people don't always go to as well. So I think let them know, and they can at least assess whether it's worth looking at. And then from a personal perspective, I know this isn't going to be for everyone's street, but personally, I've invested in some solar panels for my house. I actually did it as a DIY install as well, which was a bit of it was a personal project, but it was certainly challenging. So I've got 22 panels on the roof of my house, feeding 2 inverters, and I've got 20 kilowatts of battery storage as well. And I think that as a family, we've had to really think about how we use our energy to get optimal use from that. So during the winter months, we use cheaper overnight charging, but during the summer, we moved to immersion heating for our boiler, or sorry, for our hot water tanks, rather than using gas to heat the immersion. That saves around 50p a day of gas during the summer. It's not necessarily a great amount, but it adds up over that 6-month period. And with the solar panels that I have got, and I'm not getting paid for export, I'm only just kind of mitigating import costs. I'm saving around £1,400 a year on energy by changing the way we use gas. And during the summer months, we use about £3 a month of energy. And that's just where the inverters kind of connect to the grid and just sort of baseline from the grid. So so it's a significant saving that I'm making at home. Yeah, it's going to take a fair while to pay back, and every house and everyone's situation will be different around that. But it's that's one thing a project that I found particularly interesting to do at home. But I've gone as far as I've now got a home assistant, which is like a Raspberry Pi, and what I now do though is I use it to set the TV volume at 2 in the morning to go down to 40% of the sound rather than 70, which is like on an all daytime level. That's not to save power. That's just so the kids don't wake me up in the morning when they go downstairs to put the TV on. So I get an extra half an hour in bed, which is quite nice. But no, the home assistant though, it does allow me to do other things around automation. So it allows me to then actually, if it's going to be sunny like it is enough today, I can tend not to charge overnight because I know there's going to be enough solar today based on the weather forecast to top my batteries up. So again, it's just trying to use the technology to be as optimal with my energy consumption as possible. I could go on for hours about this, but I won't bore you all with it all. I save that for the Friday ramble I have with Luke, which is the actual name of the meeting, the conversation we have, because sometimes it's good just to talk about these things. And so I think just going back to just keep talking about this with your colleagues, because there will be others that will have other ideas, and see how as an organisation we can contribute.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin, for the insight. And I really learned a lot of things about what you do personally to cut down energy cost and to be energy efficient. And in terms of lightings and heatings, our champions keep giving us this good feedback about opportunities they've got with heating and lighting in the schools and functions. And myself, Luke, and the other team members, we're doing lots of things like our major energy saving programs. These ideas came up from our champions. It's helping us to kind of cut costs at the university and still be like energy efficient. So thank you, Kelvin, for this opportunity. I'll let Luke say one or two things about. I know you and Luke have this long-standing joke. I know you talk about that in a bit, Luke. But if you've got any questions for Kevin, just ask your question. So I'll just leave it now to look.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for attending today, and open up the floor to any questions. Please be nice. And also that sometimes we can go on a lot about very specific things. So please, this gives you an opportunity just to fire those kind of questions about maybe something you heard and maybe we didn't explain quite enough, or me and Kevin could go on for hours about certain bits and pieces. So if you ever want a chat, please feel free to grab us on particularly DTS topics. But yeah, over to you guys in the audience.
So Milan's got a question.
Okay.
So we've been talking about the ENCO matrix. I wonder whether there's going to be a bit more introduction to that.
The ENCO matrix, yeah. So for the main ENCO, we've been having that discussions in our one-to-ones, and we've been, bringing champions up to date about what's going on with the ENCO certificate. So at the moment, we're just kind of waiting our pledge to be signed off with the VC, and as soon that is done, we tend to begin to monitor progress of our champions via the scorecard. And the scorecard is a metric style document we're providing for champions to kind of monitor what they're doing. And we also told champions, we are happy for you to update the categories on the scorecard, just as it suits your school and your function, how it's relevant and what you're committed to. So for the ENCO at the moment, we just still waiting for the sign off. And as soon we have that done, we will begin to move forward with that, and we'll let champions know what next we want to do with the ENCO certification. Thank you.
So how soon will we are going to expect sign off?
I'm afraid I don't have that information at the moment, but it's something that I'm happy to get back to you on as soon as possible. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I see Joanne's hand is up. So
Yep.
would you like to come in next?
Yeah, it's I'm part of the same team with Ilan. So we actually just had a meeting together just before this one, so it's quite useful. Yeah, so the ENCO, I suppose what we were just going on from what Ilan was saying was that matrix. Is it for, I know you're waiting for the sign off, but I suppose we were just trying to get our head around it. From what you've just said, is it that we as a school would decide how we want to use that as a tool? Because we were thinking of introducing it to our colleagues just so that they were aware, kind of as a discursive document to share with them, not in our next staff day, but probably one, we probably won't have another staff day till September. So we were going to kind of introduce it to them and discuss it with them then. Is that a sensible thing, do you think?
So I'll come in on this.
Yeah.
I think that's a really useful way to go, at least expressing the way we're traveling. Obviously, this document comes a bit out of the back of our university data in terms of when we came round department by department. We represented, for all of you that were champions a year ago, we came around to every department function, met the head of school and met you guys as the first champions. And we gave you some indicators of what was the cost for your particular department school, and kind of went through that exercise. At the moment, what we're trying to do is, because the university is going through that phase of change with consolidating into directorates and some schools and functions being changed and integrated with others, we are just waiting for the dust to settle a little so that we can compare apples with apples rather than apples with pears with the way that those changes. So this scorecard comes in as a good metric indicator of how schools and functions are behaviourally starting to change going forward. So it is, I would love for you to take it forward with your other colleagues and team members, start populating it.
Yeah, we were just thinking that it might be useful just as a tool to help them sort of get into the language and the understanding. So is that good idea?
That sounds like a great idea. It's a good intro into that, even if you don't have it completely in place.
Yeah.
At least and this is what we say about lots of stuff at the university. We can't go from 0 to 100 in one step. We've got to go gradually through that, as me and Kevin have discussed previously, and me with lots of you out there. So just those small steps, taking it, kind of slowly moving through. So yeah.
And just one, sorry, Kevin. Just so you know, Luke, is we are going to be having some carbon literacy training at the IOE. It's actually happening, so I'll send you an email. Okay, bye. Sorry, Kevin.
So I was going to say, what so one of the things that we've done in DTS, so whilst I'm the sustainability champion for DTS, there's lots of good stuff that happens and lots of ideas that happen within the department as well. So so we have probably a quarterly meeting which sustainability helps support us with that, where we use that to run through some ideas with the team. They share some things that they've come up with as well, and we use that. That's where I was going to use those sort of ways to manage that as well, just because it gives everyone a sort of focus point then to have those conversations and bring things to a kind of semi-formal forum. But yeah, rather than being otherwise conversations happening everywhere and you can lose track of them. So for this way, it's a nice way for us to bring it all together really and have a sensible conversation with our sustainability colleagues as well to help shape those, because sometimes the ideas aren't new and the ones that others have come up with and are actively aware or dismissed, like wind turbines. Sorry, I don't have to get in. But but there'll be other things that come up as well, which sometimes, oh well, we haven't thought about that, because the lens that people have is very the environment that they're in. So yeah, we find that internal sustainability working group quite a useful way to talk about things as well.
So if no one else has got questions, I've got questions for Kevin. I'm going to be nice to him. So Kevin, as a champion, how do you find that role in your department in terms of driving an element of sustainability day in, day out?
To be honest, so I guess the champion concept came about just after I'd finished some of my solar panels at home. So I had a general interest in it as well, I guess is the first point around that. So when I go in and because I have a reasonable understanding of how some of this works, at least nowhere near as much as our colleagues in sustainability, as a way to help, we can start having those conversations with people. And what I found is a lot of people find the conversations quite daunting because it can get quite technical and specific, or they feel like the change that they would like to make isn't really a big enough change, that so they will bringing up the ideas as well. So one thing we've been trying to do is just keep encouraging those conversations really, and that's the hard bit, is where everyone's really busy, to kind of just have those touch points with people and be open, that they can come and have a quick, oh, but I've just seen this, what do you think, and just a lot of it's just having conversation, and that's the hardest thing to kind of to find these days, is that just that time to talk to people. We don't have as many water coolers now because a lot, where everyone's remote as well, so those conversations you would naturally have in corridors or things, is just trying to find a way to have those still. So I think that's what I find the hardest thing, and it's a constant working on activity as well, really.
Thank you for that. Right, I'm going to just open up to the floor if there's any more questions, and if there isn't, I'm going to thank you all for coming, give you all some time back which, as Kevin has just said, always a vital thing. Maybe you can go and have a conversation with a colleague for 5 minutes, see if you can't talk about sustainability. Anyone else with any comments? I'll take silence as golden. Thank you all very much for coming, and hope to see you at the next drop-in clinic in about a month's time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.